Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I am with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Magic Treehouse, Midnight on the Moon, written by Mary Pope Osbourne. Chapter 5. Hang on! Annie drove the moon buggy over bumps and hollows. It bucked like a bronco. I'm going through there! She pointed to an opening between two mountains. Jack held onto the dashboard. The buggy bumped toward the opening and shot through. On the other side, the ground was even rockier. Look for the fourth M thing, said Annie, bouncing up and down. Jack groaned. Looking for anything on this wild ride was impossible. Slow down, he said. How? Try pressing the brake pedal on the floor, slowly. Annie pressed on the brake. The buggy slowed down. Jack sighed with relief. The ride was still bumpy, but now at least he could take a good look at the moon. He had never been to such colorless, barren place. There was no green, no blue, no red. No water, no trees, no clouds. Only giant gray rocks and craters, and an American flag. Oh man, said Jack. That's from the first astronauts who landed on the moon. And look! A telescope, said Annie. She drove near the flag and telescope. Then she put her foot on the brake until the buggy stopped. She pressed a button that said off. Then she and Jack hopped out. They took slow, giant steps to the site of the first moon landing. Beside the flag was a sign. Annie read it aloud. Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. July 1969 A.D. We came in peace for all mankind. That's a good message, said Jack. He handed the moon book to Annie. Then he took out his notebook and pencil to copy the sign. Let's leave our own message, said Annie. What should we say? Said Jack. The same thing, said Annie, but say we are the first kids. Jack turned to a new page in his notebook. In big letters he wrote their message. Now we have to sign it, Annie said. Jack signed his name. Then he passed the notebook and pencil to Annie. She signed her name and passed the notebook back. Jack tore out the piece of paper. He put it by the flag. Today the first kids from the planet Earth came to the moon. We came in peace for all children. Jack, Annie. No wind would ever blow the message away. No rain would ever fall on it. It would be there forever unless someone moved it. Thinking of forever made Jack feel dizzy. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. Then he remembered the time. Had 2 hours passed yet? I wish I had a watch, he said, standing up. We might be running out of time. Oh, wow! A moon man, said Annie. What? Jack turned to look at her. She was staring through the telescope. Jack walked over to the telescope. Annie stepped aside so he could look too. Jack gasped. In the distance, something was flying above the ground. It looked like a giant man in a spacesuit. Chapter 6. High Jump. Who is that? Said Jack. I don't know, said Annie, but we'll soon find out. She started waving. No, said Jack. He grabbed her arm. Let's go back to the base before he gets here. Why? Said Annie. We don't know who he is, said Jack. We don't know if he's friendly or mean or what. But we can't go back, said Annie. We haven't found the fourth M thing yet. We won't be able to go home. It doesn't matter. We can lock the door at the moon base until he goes away, said Jack. Then we can get new air tanks. Jack hurried to the moon buggy. Come on. He jumped into the driver's seat. Annie gave a little wave to the dot in the sky. Then she climbed into the moon buggy. The buggy took off. Careful, said Annie. They bumped over the rocks as Jack turned the buggy around. Then they zoomed toward the pass. Jack steered around craters and rocks. More than once the buggy nearly tipped over. Whoa! Slow down, said Annie. They were almost at the mountain pass. Suddenly a cloud of dust flew up in front of them. The ground trembled. Watch it! Cried Annie. Jack couldn't see a thing. He stepped on the brake. The buggy jerked to a stop. The dust settled. A giant rock had fallen into the narrow pass. It was stuck between two walls of rock. They were trapped! Jack quickly found a picture of a giant rock in the moon book. He read aloud, "Rocks of all sizes crash into the moon from outer space. These rocks are called meteorites." "We're lucky that meteorite didn't land on us," said Jack. "Yeah, and I guess it's too big to be the M thing," said Annie. She had climbed out of the moon buggy and was standing by the meteorite. It was more than twice as tall as she was. Jack looked at the black sky. The flying thing was nowhere in sight. Yet. "We'll have to jump over it," said Annie. "Jump? I don't think so," said Jack. "It's too high." "I'm going to try anyway," said Annie. "Wait, let's think first." But Annie was already backing up. 1, 2, 3, go! She shouted and took giant leaping steps toward the meteorite. When Annie got close to the rock, she pushed off the ground. Then she flew through space and disappeared behind the meteorite. "Annie!" Jack called. There was no answer. "Oh, brother," Jack said. He backed up and took off toward the rock. He jumped as high as he could. Then he was flying through space. Jack hit the ground and fell face down into the dust. Jack tried to stand, but his suit was too bulky. He tried to roll over, but his suit made that even impossible. "Oh, no," he groaned. "Not again." "Are you here?" asked Annie. "Did you make it?" "Yes." Jack was relieved to hear her voice, but he couldn't turn his head to see her. He could only hear her over the radio. "Can you help me up?" he asked. "Nope," said Annie. "Why not?" "I fell down too," she said. "Oh, brother," Jack sighed. "Now we are really in trouble." He tried to stand again and failed. "Can you see anything?" he asked. "Just the sky," said Annie. "Wow, is it weird?" "I'm worried about our air tanks," said Jack. "I feel like it's been 2 hours." "Jack," said Annie. "And what about that moon man?" said Jack. "Where did he go to?" "Jack," whispered Annie. "What?" "He's here," she said. "The moon man is here." "What?" "He's standing above me." Chapter 7. The Moon Man. Jack's heart nearly stopped. He could hear Annie talking. "Hi," she said. "We come in peace." There was silence. Then Jack heard Annie say, "Thank you. I have to help my brother up now." A moment later, Annie rolled Jack onto his back. She grabbed his hand and pulled him up. "Thanks," said Jack once he was standing. The moon man was a few feet away. His face was hidden by a metal visor. He looked like a spaceman, a huge spaceman, with a giant tank on his back. It was as big as a refrigerator. "That's a jetpack," said Jack. "I've seen pictures of future astronauts flying with those things. It's like a mini spaceship, right?" Moon Man didn't answer. "I don't think he can hear us," said Annie. "He's not hooked up to our radio." "Oh, right," said Jack. "I'll write him a message." "Good idea," said Annie. Jack pulled out his notebook and pencil. He wrote, "We're Jack and Annie. We come in peace from America. Who are you?" Jack handed the notebook and his pencil to the Moon Man. They looked tiny in his big hands. The Moon Man looked down at the message. He looked at the tiny pencil. Then he turned the notebook over. Jack and Annie watched as the Moon Man put the pencil to the paper. He was writing something very carefully. Finally, he gave the notebook back to Jack. Jack and Annie stared at the marks. "Stars," said Annie. "He drew stars." "Maybe it's a space map," he said. "Space map," said Annie. "Hey, Jack, map starts with M." "Oh, wow," said Jack. "This must be the 4th M thing." "Let's ask him what his map means," said Annie. She turned around. "We'll never know now," she said. "Why?" Jack looked up from the map. "That's why." Annie pointed. The Moon Man was flying over the mountains. "Thanks!" Annie cried. Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for chapters 8, 9, and 10. Goodbye.